Salutations, Legion of Doom. Welcome to Podcast The Storm, where socially awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all about nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the nerdy occultist, aka the authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Hello, folks. How is quarantine life going for you? Did you remember the rules of Zombieland?
Don't be a pansy-ass bitch.
Well, I was thinking more of, the double tap, the avoid bathrooms, the don't cultivate connections, the
those should be
the little things, but did Columbus actually add the don't be a pansy ass bitch to the list? I don't think he did.
That's part of my list.
Because you are definitely the Tallahassee of our friend group.
Yeah. And hopefully our second co-host, the primordial source of evil in comics, Corrupt, will be joining us sometime soon. And I'm your host / Time World 1B, the Brainstormer Pop Culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
Did you just affect a southern draw just because I compared you to Tallahassee?
Oh no, I always talk like that. You never noticed before?
No, you don't. You don't have a southern draw. Hardly at all. If ever. Anyway.
Ed Brewer says, yo. What's up, Ed?
Hello, Ed.
So yeah, tonight we will be covering some stuff. A lot more, mostly it's stupid stuff by stupid people. Well, not stupid people, but people who made stupid choices and talk stupid.
Well, no, it's not even necessarily stupid choices. It's people who, despite having fully functioning intellectual abilities at their disposal, completely bend over backwards and misuse said intellectual abilities.
Mm-hmm. So I believe we have to wait at least a good moment to, in order to wait for the article to load. So, yeah, how have you been, Ed, or any one of our audience members that is watching currently? Well, how has everyone been for the last week of quarantine, stupidity, and possibly becoming somewhat crazy because you've been stuck in a house for practically 3 weeks?
Well, in my case, 3 weeks is nothing. I rarely leave the house unless I have a very good reason to. So to me,
Well, I mean, you can't even leave the house.
yes, I can. It's just a pain in the ass.
Yeah, you're disabled, so.
You had better be fucking joking right now. I'm not that bad. I don't.
You have to use a walker.
Yes.
You are literally Mr. Glass.
Effectively, yes. Though I'm not quite that brittle. I just could not take a punch without Actually, I wouldn't double over in pain because I have a ridiculous pain tolerance, but I would break a bone and then not notice for 3 hours. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden,
So
my
so
arm
yeah.
would be trailing. My arm would be trailing like halfway across the room, and I'd be like, "What the fuck happened there?" And people would be like, "Look down, you're bleeding," and I'd be like, "Oh, okay."
I mean, to be fair, we kind of have that in common. I didn't notice I had a bit bent toe until it was pointed out to me.
I have this terrible habit of skinning my knee on stupid shit
Mhm.
and then not noticing for like 3 hours, and then someone would point out that I basically marked up the carpet with blood, and I'll feel really annoyed
Yeah.
because usually at that point the person is more mad about the stain on the carpet than the actual fact that I've been bleeding for the past 2 hours. But whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
I can be bleeding, but you're worried about the stain on the carpet. That's neither here nor there, though. That it's just pet peeve of mine.
Mhm.
I'm bleeding, but they're worried about the stain on the carpet. The fuck?
I am uncertain if I've gone crazy or not. I don't think I'm crazy, but again, it's been 3 weeks and I really want to go outside and just go on a walk.
If you needed any motivation to be physically active, I think this quarantine was at least an indication that you probably should be.
I know, but I'm lazy.
Yeah, but by the time this quarantine is over, you'll be bouncing off the walls to do something. So maybe you'll channel that into something positive. And
I had a job to keep myself busy, but again, quarantine being a bitch.
yeah, quarantine is basically the societal equivalent of, have you tried turning civilization off and back on again?
Yeah. All right. So I don't know how to segue into our article. So, well, actually, no. Speaking of turning off and on, someone decided to turn off their brain.
Yes. As I mentioned before stream, society might break down, but the stupidity mail never does.
Come on. Okay. Even when it's fully loaded, it's still a slow piece of shit.
Yeah, and internet speeds have been down lately because basically all the motherfuckers who are inclined to use the internet are stuck at home using the internet right now.
That is true. Okay. So this is from Boundary Comics. Marvel's She-Hulk writer Donna Schwartz. Fan gatekeeping is a profoundly toxic subculture. This is by John F. Trent, published March 30th, 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Why does that name sound familiar? That Donna Schwartz.
I don't know, although apparently she got in hot water a couple months ago from crapping all over uh South Park, so maybe that's something that you might have noticed.
Well, no, it sounds like an actress name or something.
It
Or
does
like,
kind of, yeah.
yeah.
It is a very stereotypical writery sort of name.
I'm sorry.
Uh,
I was just like, it was.
you dozed off again?
No, I was checking Donna Schwartz. Anyway, because we need to get through this one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
And this is probably the shortest and the quickest of the articles we have, the two Bounding in the Comics articles that we're doing.
all right. Marvel Studios' upcoming Disney Plus She-Hulk TV series writer Dana Schwartz. Also, if I'm saying that name wrong, like the last name, I'm sorry.
No, I think you got it right. I think it is Schwartz.
Okay. All right. Okay. Where was Dennis Schwartz recently declared that fan gatekeeping is a profoundly toxic subculture. Okay.
You haven't even substantiated the fact that it exists, let alone is toxic. So I'm gonna need to see your arguments, please. Some people ask for papers, I ask for arguments. In a possible future where I become the totalitarian leader of the earth, it's not going to be show me your papers, it's going to be show me your arguments.
Okay. What was I? For one thing, gatekeeping. Granted, I do believe there are people, who, probably people we have kind of affiliation with, do or have gatekeeped before.
Yeah, but what they call gatekeeping is essentially just quality control.
Basically, what originally started off with what we wanted, right? That's
Yeah.
what they're referring to as gatekeeping.
It's basically you hold anything to, or you hold people to some kind of standard of skill and or talent, therefore bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's the old adage of why do you care so much about knowing about characters and storytelling and stuff? Why don't you just accept every filthy casual who rocks up into your medium and says that they're a geek because they happen to like the, I fucking love science Facebook page or some shit like that.
Mm-hmm. Um. Well, because you're not actually really putting yourself into into that.
Yeah, you haven't demonstrated any actual level of geekdom aside from the kind of stuff you might find at your average FYE and or Hot Topic or Spencer's.
I am Hot Topic. I'm ashamed to say that I have bought stuff from there. That I've gone into Hot Topic and bought stuff.
That doesn't surprise me. It seems very much in line with your sort of aesthetic.
Oh, fuck you.
I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I'm just saying you seem to like dark, brooding, edgy sort of colors, so Hot Topic makes sense.
I bought a book bag there for school. I'm just saying that makes me feel like a god damn it.
It could be worse.
Oh yeah, no, it could have been the employees.
This is true.
Yeah.
Or you could have been an employee back in the 90s when Hot Topic first opened and started appropriating the shit out of the goth subculture.
God, the gossip really got fucked over in the last few years, haven't they?
Well, they practically don't exist so much anymore. Like the goth subculture basically got splintered into um half of a group of like metalheads and half of a group of like new agey Wiccan sort of people. Because half of the goth subculture in the 90s and so forth was like an interest in dark edgy shit, and half of it was interested in like the sort of dark death based sort of macabre spirituality. So half of those people became love and light Wiccan types, and the other half became like death metal fans.
Oh. Funny enough, I actually knew a few goth kids in my schools growing up. Not like super goth, but obviously an aesthetic and stuff.
Yeah, I had a friend who was sort of goth adjacent as well.
Yeah. Most of them were girls, now that I think about it.
Yeah, that was the case with my friend as well. She also had a massive obsession with dragons, which was interesting.
That is interesting. And weirdly enough, they never acted like the stereotypical goth like one you would see in movies, obviously.
Mhm.
They were actually very nice.
Yeah, I found that most people that I've met that are sort of gothy are that way. Like the darkness and the aesthetic that they evoke is either sort of an external thing, or it's they use all of what darkness they have on that shit, and then inside they're just sort of nice.
For the fluffy bunnies and marshmallows.
Although I did know a goth guy in college who carried around throwing stars, which was interesting.
Sounds like a very edgy boy.
You would think, but not really. He was just into really weird stuff. And it just so happened that he was the kind of person who would rather carry around throwing stars to stab people with than risk the possibility of getting stabbed. And in fact, this one time, when we were hanging out, um, him and like two of my other friends decided to go um, over to another one of the dorm buildings on the bus, and I decided to go on a walk with them there, and he literally offered to lend me his throwing stars in the case that I needed to go back to my dorm by myself afterwards.
And I thought I had a colorful history.
Okay, you know me. You know the kind of weird people that I tend to make friends with. Does it really surprise you that I knew a guy who offered to lend me his throwing star so I didn't get stabbed?
Fair point. Anyway, moving back to the article. These comments come after Schwartz railed on South Park back in February, saying it seems impossible to overstate the cultural damage done by South Park. I remember hearing about this. I didn't really care because, again, I'm not a big fan of South Park myself.
Mm.
I mean, granted, I wouldn't be saying uh, cultural damage done by South Park because, personally, I don't really think it's.
She might have some other cockamamie argument about this, but I'm willing to bet that the cultural damage she's referring to is the fact that somebody on the South Park staff mocked her and or her positions on a topic, um, completely piss ignorant of the fact that South Park mocks literally everyone in every perspective of the world ever. Or
Oh, yeah.
perhaps worse, and this is the kind of person that really fucking annoys me. They like South Park whenever it mocks everyone but them, but the second an episode occurs that mocks them, it's, oh, how dare you! I'm not like those other people. Well, yes, you are, darling. That's the whole point of South Park. Everyone is level on the slab of mockery and comedy. And if you don't like their mocking version of you, then don't be like that mocking stereotype they made of you. Or alternatively, you can make counter arguments. You don't have to defame and undermine South Park. You can just argue with them if you find it really that triggering.
Or have some self awareness and learn to laugh at yourself.
Yes, you could take the mockery as a chance for self-improvement, but I don't know, baby steps here, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. For the record, I pulled up Donna Schwartz. Donna Schwartz.
Hmm.
Yeah. For the record, this is like a Wikipedia description, so it may not be as accurate. Granted,
Hmm.
I'm not entirely sure myself. Anyway, Donna J. Schwartz is an American journalist and author. She was previously a correspondent at Entertainment Weekly. She's also the author of 3 books.
So again, we find here a perfect example of someone with apparently enough intelligence to write 3 books and get them published.
Um, Before you say that, she wrote a book in 2019 called The White Man's Guide to White Male Writers of the Western Canon.
Again, someone perfectly capable of using intelligence and who actively is misusing it.
Hmm. Hmm.
But
Sorry.
incidentally, Marvel, it,
Okay,
it
never. It's
yeah,
like a parody humor comic.
right, but okay, but mocking white male culture essentially, or assuming that Western culture is white male culture, which it is not, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, back to my point. Incidentally, Marvel, this is the person you choose to hire to write She-Hulk, and this isn't the comics. Like this wouldn't be out of place actually in the comics in this day and age. I mean, how we just got done a couple weeks ago talking about the New Warriors for fuck's sake. But
Mm-hmm.
in the MCU, I expect a little bit more self-awareness on the part of Mr. Kevin Feige because he had to sign off on this at some level. To which I say, really, Kevin? Really?
I don't know. Maybe she's actually a good writer.
It is possible. There is, a storied history of people having wacky positions and being good at writing. I mean, Steve Ditko was a Randian objectivist who tried to square that with also being a Buddhist. So yeah, weird works in comics and comics affiliated media. I'm just saying this isn't what I would call a good sign. Anyway, back to the article.
Okay, so she has a tweet.
Mhm.
In retrospect, it seems impossible to illustrate the cultural damage done by South Park, the show that portrayed earnestness as the only sin and taught that mockery is the ultimate inoculation against all criticism.
You mean people taking themselves seriously is a bad thing, and being able to take the piss out of those people who take themselves too seriously is generally a good thing? Because, yeah, I would generally agree with that. People who are so up their own ass or the ass of their moralities do need to be taken down several pegs, especially when they assume that their positions on topics like politics and morality make them better than everyone else in the fucking room. And just like I suspected when we first started this, I'm betting that most of her argument is going to be it's bad because it mocked me. I thought it was fine when it mocked everyone else, but now that they mocked me, that's a problem because I am actually better than most people. Yeah, no. Nobody elected you the moral version of an aristocrat. Please fuck off.
In response to the ensuing criticism and outright mockery of her statements regarding South Park, Schwartz would play the victim and ask, "Is there something that women are allowed to have an opinion on?" I,
Women are perfectly allowed to have any opinion they choose, darling. However, no opinion is immune from argumentation or mockery, which means that while you are perfectly morally able to have any argument you or any position you like, if said position is mind-numbingly stupid, it's going to be treated as though it is mind-numbingly stupid. And many people are probably going to find very, very colorful ways of telling you, by the way, this position of yours that you have said in public on Twitter is mind-numbingly stupid, and you should feel at least some level of derision in regards to it. And you looked at that and you said, this is because I'm a woman, because there obviously was nothing logically incoherent or absolutely bumfuck no self-awareness having about my statement. It has to be because I, as a woman, can't be bothered to have an opinion. Yeah, no, you are free to have any opinion you want, but everyone else in the goddamn room is perfectly also able to say your opinion is stupid. That's not the same as not letting you have it. What it is effectively is you stated a position and a bunch of people argued with your position. That doesn't invalidate your right to have that position. It just means that you need to be aware if you say X and everyone around you says Y, you're going to be the odd man out. And that's totally fine, but you should be accountable to it.
Mm-hmm. Another tweet. I tweeted a pretty mild opinion about a TV show on my own personal Twitter account like a week ago, and I've been getting multiple death threats every day since. Like, lol, is there something that women are allowed to have an opinion on? Sorry, I had to finish it.
Okay, the statements get raped in a fire or I hope I hope uh a piano falls on you or something is not a death threat. It is a statement of exasperation. It is essentially, wow, this bitch is stupid. I'm going to rhetorically beat my head against a brick wall in the hopes that she gets the point of how stupid she's being. It's not a death threat, one. And two, your 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 statement that you are referring to here as mild is essentially this TV show has ruined society. That is the gist of what you said. And not only is that the gist of what you said, but you phrased it as though it was some apocalyptic moral proclamation. You essentially pulled the woe is me, won't people think of the children card, but you did it with all of society. So essentially, you pulled the won't somebody please think of society? That's how you phrased that. So that to you is mild. Apocalyptic, moralizing, puritanical condemnation of a TV show to you is a mild criticism of said TV show. Do you not, like, at the risk of quoting the Princess Bride meme, you use the word mild there just now, and I don't think it means what you think it means. Or are you actually that moralistic and hysterical that apocalyptically besmirching South Park is your equivalent of a mild criticism of it? To which I would ask, dear God, I hope I never see a harsh position of yours on anything. If this thing has ruined society and it is impossible to understate the negative cultural impact it has had on civilization, is a mild take from you. Also, you said lull there, which implies that you're laughing at this, which suggests to me that you don't actually take the supposed death threat you got serious. Because death threats that you take seriously usually aren't the kind of thing you laugh at. It is, however, the kind of thing you mock if someone is just being a dipshit on the internet, which I think is probably what happened to you there, which is why you're able to laugh at it and you didn't actually feel the need to call the police or even report them to Twitter, presumably. Given that Twitter will ban just about anyone at the very literal drop of a hat on most days, if they even have the slightest inclination to do so.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What was I? All right. Now Schwartz decided to publicly shame one of her critics as well as the entire male gender. She stated, "Men really need to take a deep breath." Okay. So where was? Let me read the tweets that accompanies that.
Okay.
Schwartz, men really need to take a deep breath, and captioned here, well, not captioned, picture here, Juicy Junior Revival. So, where on your Instagram is there a mention that you're passionate about comics? In a medium where frauds are spotted like criminals casing a bank, how do you truly believe you'll write something interesting? I would say good luck, but that would simply imply you give a shit beyond your own upward mobility. So how about don't fuck up an iconic character created by a company that has grown the IP for nearly 50 years?
Okay, I will admit that criticism is a little bit overdramatic. I will freely admit that. However, the point you were getting at, darling, A, you were dealing with a man, and you essentially, in your own mind, saw him as a representative of team men. That's why you said, in response to this one dude getting a little bit overzealous with the criticism, men need to take a chill pill, because in your mind, this is something um synonymous with or um demonstrative of all men, or at least the demographic we refer to as men. To which I'm gonna bust out one of my old standbys. Identities are not teams. Demographics are not teams. Just because someone is a member of a certain demographic does not mean they have any predisposition whatsoever to affiliate with and or agree with some doctrinal pronouncements in some kind of actual version of the bro code from How I Met Your Mother. There is no bro code, just like there is no woman code, there is no sisterhood, there is no patriarchy. Like, identities are not teams. There is no Jewish conspiracy, there is no white male conspiracy, there is no female conspiracy, and so on and so on and so on. Individual men have individual positions that other individual men regularly disagree with, because men are not a hive mind. Just like women are not a hive mind, just like black people are not a hive mind, just like Jews are not a hive mind, just like every other demographic of people are not a fucking hive mind. And incidentally, the criticism you were getting, if you decouple it from the dramatic woo that accompanied it, essentially was just, you are working in comics or something associated with comics, and there is a standing tendency of people getting into this industry for um purely opportunistic reasons without any sort of skill credentials behind it. Therefore, could you please make sure you don't screw this the fuck up? And also, if you are passionate about this media, perhaps you should publicize it more so that people know what they're dealing with and what they're getting themselves into, which is a perfectly reasonable position to take outside of the somewhat overdramatic way he chose to say it.
Yeah. Um, okay. As shown in Schwartz's tweet, Instagram user Juicy Revival questioned Schwartz's passion for the comic book genre after she shared a photo of the graphic novel Dancing at the Pity Party by Tyler Feeder on her Instagram. And here's the picture here. I've never heard of this novel. Well, not novel, but comp.
Graphic novel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
graphic novel. So I can't really comment on it.
it seems very obscure and like non-traditional for the comic book media. It seems very much like a hipster comic, which honestly to me is more of a red flag than if she had like if she had shared a regular comic, hell, if she had shared a She-Hulk comic, that would have made sense to me because she's working on She-Hulk. But instead of sort of one of the mainstays of the medium, she picks this really on the face of it hipster looking, I'm sure subversive fringe comic that has nothing to do with the genre or the medium as a whole. Like, and believe me, I get liking obscure comics and obscure characters. It's kind of my thing. But even obscure characters within the comic book medium and in the superhero genre are still a part of the main genre of comics. And the genre and the medium are kind of commingled in a way that's relatively inseparable. So to say you only like these sort of hipstery sort of comics basically says to me that you think that there's something wrong with the vast majority of the medium and only the exceptions are good. It's kind of like walking up to a black person and saying, "You're not like the other black people." It kind of makes it seem like the person who would say such a thing has a negative opinion of black people as a whole and sees only individual exceptions, which would be a terrible, terrible position to take. But you can say something equivalent to that about comics, at least implicitly, and no one is allowed to have any sort of problem with that. I'm sorry, but no, that's not how anything works. You can basically hold up this one comic as you're not like the other comics, and no one is allowed to go, well, hey, that makes it seem like you don't like comics, and given that this is your first comic related post, at least in the foreseeable past, that's a bit suspect and suggests a certain level of opportunism and or a certain level of wanting to change the medium you're working in rather than actually work within it.
I think I have more.
No, I'm good. Moving
Okay.
on.
Yeah, moving on. Juicy Revival asks, so where on your Instagram? Okay, yeah. Um, yeah, no, we already read that. Juicy added, it's connected me. It's connected medium with a character driven by its original source material. My question is this: why are you interested beyond the money? What makes you want to write about She-Hulk when you clearly are not interested in that genre?
I disagree with Juicy on this. I don't think it's the money that she's interested in. I think it's the clout. Because generally speaking, with these sorts of artistic types, what they're interested in is influence over art itself, more so than money. Especially given that large amounts of these people tend not to like capitalism very much, and therefore kind of object to the very principle of money, which is sort of counterintuitive in and of itself, but that's uh that's something else to it's a story for a different day, I guess is what I'm saying. So yeah, I think she's less interested in the money than she is in having a impact on the medium, by which I suspect she would say change it rather than actually work within the parameters of the medium itself. And the funny thing is, most people who have successfully managed to change comics usually do so by not trying to change anything, but just trying to serve the medium they're working with. And the people that actively try to change the medium usually end up dying somewhere on the vine because nobody actually likes the thing they tried to do. Because when you walk up to anything, whether it be an artistic medium, a machine, or a person and your initial assumption is this thing is broken, I'm going to try and fix it, you run into problems when it becomes quite apparent that the thing in question is not broken. Because if you try to fix something that is not broken, there's about a 60% chance you're going to break it. There's probably about a 30% or 30 or 40% chance you might stumble on something that is as effective as whatever you tried to fix. Or in about 10% of those cases, you might just maybe find a way to improve the thing you're trying to fix. But the fact remains, those aren't good odds. If you try to fix something that isn't broken, you're more than likely going to break it.
Okay, here's more about Juicy. They continued, pointless scene. Why am I hearing that the industry that birthed the characters she is about to write is in trouble on every major journalist? After the train wreck that was Birds of Prey, I would prefer not having another writer, he uses air quotes, into the arena and produce a pile of garbage. Even her most ardent simps and sycophants. That's your
Sycophants.
cue, Tim. Sycophants. That's your cue, Tim. Won't support.
Mm.
I gotta admit, Juicy is kind of being a little over dramatic or melodramatic.
He's going a little bit overboard, but interesting question. Do we know for a fact that he's male?
No idea.
Because I just thought of the most hilarious irony. What if this is a woman trying to tell her this, and she basically, on the off chance that this is a woman who tried to say this, can you imagine? Can you imagine the reaction of her just getting lumped in with men because she had the wrong opinions? Because that's the thing about these kind of usernames. You don't really know the gender of the person in question, do you?
Good point.
I mean, if it's somebody's name or like their pronouns are listed somewhere, then that's something. But like with these kind of usernames, it could just as easily be a woman. Almost like identity doesn't matter nearly as much as argument. But what the fuck do I know?
Mm-hmm. Okay. What was it? Juicy Revival added. The point of my seething protest is that I can smell the disingenuous agenda, driven persona, and I would like the writer of the Stunning and Brave Guts tell me why she is motivated to write about a comic character. Sure hope that answer isn't only about cash and feminist agenda, because the world, because that world would be selfish, wouldn't it?
I kind of agree with most of that, although I think he made his point well enough in the first post, and he didn't need to go into quite this much detail. But then again, I'm the king of waffling on incessantly about shit, so maybe I
Yes, you
should
are.
maybe I shouldn't throw stones from inside a glass house, especially because said glass would probably impale me.
Oh, I thought you were okay.
No,
Um,
go forth.
okay, so yeah. On Twitter, Schwartz replied, "Oh no, he doubled down." Um, Schwartz also replied on Instagram, "Why do I need to prove anything to you?" And also, lol, do you really think anyone goes into comics for the money? Can I
Now,
ask?
now, see that goes to prove my point earlier. I don't think she's doing this for the money. I think she's doing it for the clout and the influence and the artistic authority. Derp.
Hmm.
Go on.
Sorry. Okay. Well, can I ask what have you created? Okay, well, that's a bitch thing to say.
Okay, but okay. For the sake of illustrative purposes, this is totally fine. Because here's the thing, dear. You have to prove something because this is a subculture that is predicated on primarily on three things: passion, expertise, and meritocracy. And if you can't provide demonstrations of one or more of these things, then you are effectively a bad representative of the subculture and probably shouldn't have a vaunted position within it. Everyone in geek culture has to prove themselves at some point because that's what geek culture is. We are, for better or worse, the unofficially autistic, quote unquote, people who obsess over shit like details and storylines and continuity and character development and merit in art style and every other critical minutia thing you can imagine because that's what defines us as people to begin with. That's what led us to these kind of hobbies to begin with. And that's also what got the shit kicked out of us a lot of the time in past eras. And funny thing, when you kick the shit out of somebody repeatedly, they get very, very, very protective and particular about whatever aspect of themselves you're kicking the shit out of them for. Therefore, those of us that are nerds are very protective of our geekery, which means that if someone comes out of the blue to change something about our geekery and they can't demonstrate one or more of those three things I just listed, they become increasingly suspect at first and outright uh outright antagonistic later. Everyone has to prove everything because essentially in geek spaces, expertise is street cred. So if you can't demonstrate some kind of expertise in this area, then you probably don't belong in the position you currently occupy. And therein lies the problem. Moving on.
Hmm. Right, the debate on Instagram would continue with Juicy Revival expressing why they are skeptical of She-Hulk and Schwartz's writing talent. However, on Twitter, Schwartz returned to her tried and true status of playing a victim because she happens to be a woman. She asked, earnest question, do male writers deal with this? Also, imagine seriously believing anyone got into comics for the money. Lol.
Okay, again, I already made my point about this. I do not think she did it for the money, and I think that was a stupid point by Juicy. But yes, male writers also deal with this shit. Basically, anyone who has not already proven themselves worthy of the position they hold are held to account because those positions are very, very powerful and very, very valuable positions. Because people care a lot about this art form, and therefore anyone who's going to have any say in this art form needs to essentially be vetted by the standards of passion, meritocracy, and expertise. And if they fail on all three of these counts, people genuinely tend towards animosity towards them. And just for the record, you could have short circuited Juicy's entire argument by saying something along the lines of, I don't know as much as I would like about this character, but I'm doing my research. Because even that will get you a certain level of respect. Because it demonstrates that you understand that the source material is valuable enough to be respected. But if you're not even willing to do research, then you make it very clear that you do not respect the source material in question and therefore probably don't deserve to be altering it. And even if you did deserve to, you don't have the knowledge necessary to actually manage it successfully. And therein lies the problem. Moving along.
Okay. Then we have the tweet here, same one we just read. Anyone who has followed Bounty Comics knows the answer to this question has nothing to do with gender. Plenty of male writers are taking over beloved franchises such as Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, Terminator, Charlie's Angels, Hellboy, not to mention Marvel Comics, DC Comics. But they aren't just taking over these franchises, they're actively warping them, and in some cases are outright hostile to fan bases that built the franchises. The people who actually buy the product and provide investors with a return that allows people to write for these properties in the first place. Okay, just I had to finish that.
Okay, but minor slip up here by the actual writer of the article. Female writers are not the problem. It's feminists. And as an example of how we know it's feminists and not women that are the problem, take a look at the writer of The New Warriors. He is male. He may not be the paragon of traditional masculinity in any conceivable dimension, but he is male, and he created one of the most abominable pieces of feminist propaganda it is possible to make in comics as an art form. So yeah, it's not women. It's feminism. Just like Germans weren't the problem with Nazi Germany. It was Nazism that was the problem with Nazi Germany. Just like the Chinese are not the problem of communist China. It's the communism. And so on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Star Trek Picard writer Michael Chabon made it perfectly clear in a recent interview he wrote Picard to piss off or provoke people. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Numerous Star fans.
We will definitely get to that. Yes.
Yeah. Numerous Star Wars fans could not be happier if Rian Johnson never touches Star Wars again after what he did to Luke Skywalker, the Force, and the entire Star Wars canon in The Last Jedi. I personally criticize Johnson as well as other Star Wars writers like Kevin Scott or on their lack of understanding of Star Wars.
Yeah, I'd agree. And again, these are just more examples. It's not women, and it's not in a lot of cases it's not even necessarily feminism. It's deconstructivism, the idea that value is a social construct rather than something inherent to a piece of art, and the fact that or the supposition that art only is a means to an end, usually a socio-political or moral one, rather than an end in itself. However, most of that ideology does come from lenses that are adjacent to feminism, and it's certainly feminism that is the beneficiary of this perspective. So, yeah, it's once again the feminism.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sorry, I was just. All right. YouTuber Gary Bielcher has openly criticized Doctor Who chief scribe Chris Chibnall. In a recent video, Bielcher stated Chibnall is incapable of writing this show because the writers for this show don't understand science fiction, nor do they understand Doctor Who. Actually, I came up with the idea for Doctor Who myself, actually.
Yeah. shout out to Gary from Nerdrotic. He is awesome, and he's an old acquaintance of mine. I don't know if he remembers me or if he even wants to, but he seemed like a cool dude at the time that I knew him. However, I do think that he's kind of gotten swept away with the wrong crowd, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay. Or was nevertheless, Swartz continues with her victimhood status. She sets up a new argument that even the idea of questioning women on their writing qualifications is sexist. She writes on Twitter, the idea that I need to somehow prove my worthiness in order to work in a certain genre is incredibly toxic and also VV sexist.
Okay, again, darling, your sex and or gender had absolutely bumfuck nothing to do with this. Everyone who is demonstrably inexperienced in a medium is subjected to the kind of quality control of that medium. And in your case, given that you're writing in a geek space, you have to play by geek rules. And geeks are very, very heavily focused, very often, on meritocracy, which means you need to demonstrate some merit. And in this case, those merits include the artistic variety, the passion variety, and the expertise variety, which you have yet to actually manage, and therefore people are suspect of you, especially given your apparent feminist proclivities, given that people who advocate feminism have of late chosen to see comics as a cultural means to an end rather than an end in itself. And it has damn near crippled the actual quality in said medium. And it's really starting to piss people off because people are heavily invested in this medium and these characters and these worlds. The more people care about something, the more protective and selective they are about that medium. You're not just going if you had a prized family heirloom, you wouldn't give it to the fucking homeless guy on the side of the road because it is extremely valuable to you, especially if it was, given to you by someone that you knew or someone that you loved. Well, the same is true of comics. People love comics, therefore they are very protective and selective about who they allow to work within it, even if they don't necessarily have any power or influence over that medium. Especially, in fact, if they don't have any power or influence over that medium. If all you can do is essentially write a strongly worded letter or uh, start a social movement, if you if nobody has the president of Marvel or DC on speed dial, and all we can say is we as the people who consume your product would really rather you didn't do that, then yeah, they're going to get quite fired up about doing what they can do to have an impact on the medium they love. Because they would really rather not see the medium they love fucked with in such a disrespectful manner.
Right, okay. Where was I? She added, the only people to whom I need to explain my experience, my credentials, and my passion are the people that hired me. Okay, in a way, I can kind of understand, but when you're dealing um, with a property that has an established fan base, I do think you also need to focus on them as well.
Well, it's more than that. This works if you are doing a job that doesn't require any sort of public relations or doesn't require any um, outside consumers to sustain. The problem, my darling, is you are making art. And art, at least of the mass market populist variety, is accountable to the people who enjoy said art. Which means that you need to make sure that as many people as possible within your target audience enjoy the art you make. Therefore, if you as an artist put out work and no one who usually likes that variety of art likes that work, you might want to consider that your art is bad, no matter how many galleries you sell your art to. Because at the end of the day, it's not the gallery owners that give you the source of your income. They get whatever they pay you from the people consuming the art, to use this metaphor. And likewise in comics, the CEOs and executives of Marvel and DC are not the people you should be deferring to, because they get their money from the people who buy and enjoy comics, which means that you need to make an effort to make your comics as enjoyable as possible. And the same goes for the MCU. Just because it's an adaptation of comics doesn't mean it's not accountable to the fan base of comics. I'd be interested because she's a writer to see if, because generally speaking, writers are also readers. That's kind of an obvious truth. Which brings up the point of, if someone did a adaptation of one of your favorite books, Donna, and they completely ruined it, would you not feel justified in being angry about it? Now, let's say that this person who ruined your favorite book kept showing up and ruining all of your other favorite books in movie form. Would you not then say something along the lines of, this person really needs to demonstrate they have some sort of credentials? And if you can understand why that scenario works, then please understand why this scenario works. You are adapting comics, and therefore the people who like comics would very much like a say, or at least some method of quality control in regards to making sure that you know what the fuck you're doing and are not just trying to actively ruin comics for your own ideological ends. Especially if this is your first outing into the medium. It's like a studio shit testing a new director who's never made a movie before, and also potentially has never been to film school. Well, my darling, you've never been to quote unquote geek school. So people are trying to make sure that geek IPs are left in the hands of people who respect that material and don't actively despise it, preferably. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. Her first argument is just completely laughable, and she even contradicts herself in her second point by admitting that there are people she needs to explain her experience and credentials to.
Yes, and she has a completely wrong-headed view of who those people are.
Mm-hmm. In her, as for her second argument, if you take it as it is, she's technically correct. She only needs to explain her experience, credentials, and passion to those who hired her. But if the show fails to capture an audience, I'm sure Disney and Marvel Studios executives might come calling, and if fan reaction to the show is wildly negative, Schwartz will learn that executives are beholden to the people who are purchasing their products.
Hopefully, but who knows at this point. The good news is, because of the coronavirus, a lot of these companies have sort of blown through whatever safety cushions they had, whatever sort of buffers of disposable cash they had. So now they have less they have less disposable money to throw around, which means they might actually have to learn what people find appealing instead of playing these moral and socio-political games all the fucking time.
Mm.
Moving along.
Yeah. All right. Undeterred by our own hypocrisy, Schwartz claims fan gatekeeping is a profoundly toxic subculture. The people who think enjoying a thing gives them ownership over it. The Dawn before you do, because I know you're gonna rant about this.
Yes, go.
It's not. We don't believe we have ownership over it. Well, I would say most of us wouldn't. It's more of. I feel like we've covered this in a way before, and I can't remember how to like get the words right. And we're not gatekeeping. Well, again, most of it. What a fan doesn't technically gatekeep. It's more of we're worried. Are you getting this right? Are you sticking fundamentally to the core of that character?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, again, it's not that we own it. It's just more of we're the ones who appreciate it and have seen this character grow and been rebooted and stuff. And it's just there is a fan base for this. If there wasn't a fan base for this character wouldn't have been given a show.
Yeah.
Nor would they have lasted this long in comics history.
Okay. You good?
Yeah, you good.
Okay. So, thing the first, being a fan of something is far from just having a passive liking for that thing. Usually there's a certain level of investment into that thing, whether it be of the emotional variety, the financial variety, the cognitive headspace variety, which is what, developing an expertise is. You use the limited resources of your brain to and you devote them to a franchise, a character, a mythos, etc. So it's not just I vaguely have positive feelings towards this thing. It's I have devoted a certain amount of my time, resources, and effort to this thing. Therefore, I would like to see it not be ruined. It's sort of like when you have a loved one who's on drugs and you give them an intervention. Now, imagine you had a loved one who was on drugs and you went through the process of giving an intervention, and their response was, "You don't own me. Just just because you're my friend, you think you have rights to tell me what to do, and so on and so on." That's basically what you're doing. Furthermore, to use a different analogy, imagine imagine comics were something a little bit more concretely important. Something like, I don't know, the FDA, the people that make sure that food and drugs are not tainted or impure. Imagine a company um makes I don't know, they farm chickens or something, and their stock of chickens has salmonella in it. And then when this shit goes to trial, they basically say, "Well, the FDA told me I shouldn't keep my chickens in this way, but I told them they had no reason to or they had no ownership over my company just because they were the people in charge of scoping out chickens to make sure that they were clean." that is also kind of like what you're doing. You're saying the people whose job it is to get the word out about your show shouldn't have any investment or say into what that show resembles, or shouldn't at least be allowed to be skeptical of the people providing them that product. Imagine if in this analogy, instead of having it be some external company, imagine the FDA itself decided to just let salmonella through like it was no big deal. Don't you think the people who buy chicken would then be somewhat angry and would be justifiably angry at the FDA for not doing their fucking job? Well, you're a writer, and we are the people consuming your products. And you don't appear to be doing your fucking job. And you appear to be actively resentful of anyone holding your feet to the fire saying, it is your job to provide, in your case, art. Why are you not providing anything that lives up to any reasonable standard of art? Especially if those people were people that, I don't know, their favorite food, you know, in my FDA chicken example. Imagine like people that chicken was their favorite food getting up in arms about that shit. Would you honestly say that their liking of that food has no bearing on their opinions on the matter? And would you honestly say that someone who worked for the FDA for 10 years or 20 years has no bearing on what any random company does in regards to food and drugs? Would you honestly say that comic book fans have no right to have an opinion or be skeptical of the people providing them their preferred products? Because that appears to be what you're saying, and it's bullshit. No matter how you slice it, I'm afraid. Industries need quality control. Artists need skill-based standards and criteria. There's a reason why in the Middle Ages it took 10 years to become a master blacksmith. Because blacksmithing is something that if you fuck it up, there will be consequences. There's a reason why sculpting took 10 years to be apprenticed at. Even people like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo had to have a master and apprentice relationship with somebody. Are you honestly telling me that you're the first artist in history who needs to have no qualitative standards to be set by? Because that appears to be also what you're saying. I'm not going to pull the Kathy Newman so you're saying shit, but a lot of this appears to be what you're saying. So you're going to have to explain to me, if I'm wrong, what you're actually saying, and then we can proceed from there. Going on.
You mean moving on?
Yes.
In this day and age where Hollywood is determined to destroy tried and true franchises with identity politics and woke politics, not to mention introducing canon-breaking characters, developments, and plot points for the sake of being modern, fan gatekeeping might be more important than ever.
I'd agree with that. If the automobile industry suddenly produced nothing but shit cars that broke every time you drove them off the lot, quality control in the auto industry would be increasingly more important. Well, in the art industry at the moment, there appears to be a group of people who want to make it so that every piece of art that's made is shit. Therefore, that variety of quality control needs to be brought in to enforce actual standards. Moving along.
Yeah. Okay. 1 second. If it keeps writing teams honest and might be one of the few things attempting to preserve the rich, wonderful storytelling of the franchises. for the record, I wouldn't say gatekeeping. I'd just say, fan appreciation and
I
holding um, artists and writers and people who take control of these IPs that have this very large established fan bases, or just a fan base in general, should be held to a certain um, standard in
Yeah,
preser-
brainstormer.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something. So,
No, you cut off. What were you gonna say?
uh, yeah, just like I don't think it's gatekeeping. I just think it's just fans holding people accountable for keeping on track with what's been established and honestly honoring the IP.
Yeah, I kind of like the sort of metaphor I stumbled on of quality control. Fans are to artistic mediums what quality control is to factories. And right now, the comic book industry really needs quality control. It also needs other things because, of course, the world has paused for the foreseeable future because of plague, but even before COVID-19, the comic book industry and all the associated entertainment media needed quality control. And they appear to still need it going on.
Oh, okay. I thought you had something more. Anyway, Schwartz then concluded on Twitter by once again shaming Juicy Revival and trying to play the victim by using her gender. She wrote, "Okay, I'm only posting this here to show how this guy has finally shown his whole ass. He is terrified at the prospect that a woman might actually genuinely love writing the same characters he enjoys. It would tear his worldview apart." Okay, Dom, before you do,
Go.
um go fuck yourself, you ignorant bitch. Um is honestly I should have saved that for the end of my talking, but I feel like it had to be said. Um that's not what Juicy Revival was talking about. He was just saying that he's not well, they are not can't think of the word. God damn it. They're not hopeful nor really have any reliable source to really believe that they are that you are a capable writer in handling the character of She-Hulk at all. Because
They're skeptical of you is the
yeah,
thing.
skeptical. Thank you, Don. I couldn't find the word.
Mhm. And once again, even if we want to entertain for the moment that your gender has anything to do with it, it's not the fact that you're a woman, it is the fact that you appear to be steeped in feminism. And feminism is not women. It's not even equality. Because otherwise, things like egalitarianism and humanism in general wouldn't exist if feminism was the only word we had to signify a philosophical desire for equality. Identities are not teams for the 100th time, and I will keep saying it for as long as it continues to be relevant. And incidentally, it's not the idea that you would love writing this character that bothers Juicy Revival from everything we've seen of him. If anything, it very much seems like the opposite is the case. What he's worried about is that you don't love writing this character, that you don't see any inherent value in writing this character, that you see this character as a means to an end rather than an end in itself. And given everything you've said thus far, I can't say that he's wrong in this regard because you haven't you okay you did okay trying to think of how I want to phrase. There's a reason why the phrase geek out exists. Because when you give a geek access to someone to tell about their favorite thing, or you give them a reason to bring up their favorite thing, they basically, for rhetorical purposes, jump up and down squealing with happiness whenever they get a chance to go into a deep dive on their favorite level of geekdom. There's a reason that that phrase exists because that is what happens whenever you get a geek talking about shit they like. What I and Brainstormer and it appears Juicy Revival all would like to convey to you is the thing is we doubt that you actually possess the capacity to geek out about She-Hulk or any comic book related medium for that matter. So yeah, if anything, the problem is we're worried that you won't love writing She-Hulk. We're worried that you'll see it only as a stepping stone to something else or a means to some sociopolitical or ideological end, rather than an end in itself that deserves to be respected and doted on and learned about. More to the point, we're also worried of your personal ego getting in the way of your ability to create good art. Because, contrary to what modern day writers might think, your art is not about you. If anything, you are a servant to it. Because the goal of any writer should be to create something that transcends them, not something that strokes their ego and sucks their dick and aggrandizes them. Moving on.
Mm-hmm.
We're only on the first story. God damn it.
And it's nearly 9:30.
It's gonna be a long one. Or we might have to save a couple of these for next week.
I can think of a couple.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm not really sure where she gets the idea that Juicy Revival is terrified that a woman might be writing She-Hulk. Ironically, Is there actually? Wait, don't. I know you're not a big fan of. Well, actually, I will look it up myself. But in any of your vast knowledge of comics, has there actually been a female writer for She-Hulk comics?
I'm pretty sure there were a few. In fact, I think the writer that made She-Hulk sort of self-aware, like fourth wall breaking, a la Deadpool, was a woman. But don't quote me on that because She-Hulk isn't my. Any of the Hulks really aren't my area of expertise.
Hmm. Sorry. Okay. Juice Revival doesn't mention women at all in the attached image. However, Juice Revival does specifically mention Donna Schwartz.
Yeah, because he appears to be judging you on your implied lack of individual merits. And incidentally, Donna, whatever merits you may or may not have do not belong to women, they belong to you as an individual. Just like any merits that Brainstormer or I have do not belong to men or even to each other, they belong to each of us individually.
Hmm.
Maybe if you could take more pride in your individual merits, you might have actually had the incentive to develop them instead of subsuming your entire identity to this nebulous idea of women as a class or team rather than just a demographic. Do you find anything, brainstormer?
Um, not yet. Just
Oh, I forget your computer is
oh no,
about.
I'm on my phone. I'm just
Okay.
checking stuff. Okay. Yeah, I found out that if I open too many tabs at once, uh, it
You
does run slower.
Yeah,
So
your computer slows down in protest
yeah.
to
Okay.
being made to work.
Maybe it's just that Juicy Revival doesn't want Dana Schwartz writing She-Hulk, given her past comments regarding South Park, her obvious disdain for men in general, her attempts to constantly play victim, and what appears to be her overall woke outlook on life. Those are all major red flags when it comes to a Hollywood writer, because we've seen over the past 5 or so years people like Dana Schwartz can't help but put that stuff into their writing, and it turns out to be a piss poor product that drives fans away from franchises.
Yeah, I agree. Which is why most of the time we avoid using bounding in the comics because if it's just about recording events, they're fine. But whenever it gets into longer editorials for bounding in the comics, we find we agree with them a little bit too much, and it becomes difficult to have anything worth saying.
Yeah, I honestly didn't think it was going to be that long.
Yeah, no, usually they're shorter, because they're just talking about the story. I kind of feel like the part where the writer himself um gives his opinions probably could have been cut and it would have been better. But I understand the impulse to figuratively bang your head against the wall when shit like this happens. I mean, hell, that's like 90% of what we do, so I again can't throw stones from inside a glass house. Probably can't throw stones just on general principle because I don't have a body that's particularly suited to throwing anything. But that's a
There's only
different.
one female related to She-Hulk.
Mm.
Um, Eliza, and I'm going to say this last name wrong. Dushku. I probably said that last name wrong, and I'm sorry.
Wait,
But
Elijah Dushku is it the actress Elijah Dushku?
she didn't write anything. She's just voiced She-Hulk. Um, in,
Oh, okay.
in
So yeah, the actress.
though she has apparently made a comment about wanting to play She-Hulk.
If she was the one that voiced She-Hulk in the Hulk cartoon, then I would totally be fine with that.
Yeah. Oh, if you guys don't know who that is, Eliza Dushku, and again, if I'm saying that last name wrong, I'm sorry. She, well, she's an actress actually very well known for working on Joss Whedon projects, specifically being Faith in Buffy the
Buffy.
Vampire Slayer, and Echo in Dollhouse.
Which reminds me, where the fuck is Joss Whedon been?
Good question. I honestly don't know.
Because like he disappeared shortly after Age of Ultron, which I understand because people people came for Joss Whedon's head because he implied that Black Widow might um find a large part of her self-worth in the idea of being a mother, and that was taken from her, and she was understandably upset about that. Um,
I thought it was. Honestly, I don't even know why.
Yeah, no, the reason why was, you remember in Age of Ultron when Black Widow was talking about they made her a monster and they also made her infertile?
Yeah. I mean, I
A
knew
bunch
about
of
that. I knew about that. I knew about like people being idiots. Personally, I think that's a really interesting idea to tackle for a character.
well, I mean, okay, so let's take it and gender flip it. Can you imagine a male character being forcibly turned sterile and not finding that in any way interesting?
Yeah, I know. Like I said, it's an interesting idea for a character.
Like even just in the context of the MCU, imagine if they had thrown into Bucky that, like, the Russians, when they made him the Winter Soldier, turned him sterile for some reason. That's a really fucking interesting subplot, especially if he was the kind of person who wanted to have a family someday.
Yeah, yeah. No, it would have been really interesting to. Yeah, no. Like I said, it's an interesting idea,
And
and
it makes perfect sense for Natasha to want a child, because I would imagine the, shadowy KGB organization that made her into the Black Widow probably did a number on her psychologically, and therefore she's probably very prone to wanting human connections.
mhm,
And being as she's a woman, one of the most primordial ways of human connection that women have access to is the prospect of being others.
right. Okay, so moving on to another Bounding into Comics article. If it will load. Okay. Um, yeah, okay, there we go. Bounding into Comics. Excuse me. Star Trek Picard showrunner Michael Chabon admits he wanted to piss off or provoke people. This by George Arenas, published March 27th, 2020. Oh, wait. Is it
Well,
20?
well, the good news, Mr. Shapirion, is you succeeded. Unfortunately, it kind of ruined your show, because trying to piss people off, not exactly a amiable goal, is what I'm
Mhm.
saying.
Okay, so this will mostly be Dalton's bit.
Because Brainstormer doesn't know as much as he should about Star Trek yet.
I'm a Star Wars guy. I can't help it. I've never really gotten into Star Trek. I've tried watching it. It's never really me.
I will attempt to fix this later, but that's neither here nor there.
I like the Orville. That's something.
Then you need to watch Star Trek Next Generation, because the Orville is basically um Star Trek Next Generation with jokes. In fact, there are actual TNG writers working on the Orville. So, which,
Okay.
which reminds me, when the fuck are we getting Orville season 3?
And it's also going to be on Hulu. Don't forget that. Um. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
showrunner Michael Chabon admitted he wanted to piss off or provoke people with his first season of Star Trek Picard. These comments and more came in a lengthy discussion and the showrunner had with Variety to promote the final episode of Star Trek Picard. Sorry. Um, Variety's Adam Berry went right for the $1 million question and asked Ron, so were there things about Picard that you knew you wanted to do that you could sense would test some boundaries for fans? Okay, you can. Do you want me to read more? Do you?
Yeah, let's get to his response, and then I'll do what I do.
Right. Okay. Gibran answered, so, sure, to the extent that I was aware of the kind of toxic fandom, the anti-SJW, sad little corner of fandom. You just disregard that. Let me see if he has any more. Okay, yeah. He then added, sometimes you're motivated to have things simply because it's possibly going to piss off or provoke people who seem to have missed the memo about just what exactly Star Trek is and always has been about.
Okay.
Okay, you're good to go.
For the record, Mr. Chabon, SJW means social justice warrior. And I'm well aware that it usually means left-wing moral authoritarian, but as anyone who actually knows the definition of the term can tell you, there are plenty of right-wing SJWs. It's just they don't often get called SJWs because there are already existing terms for them. Evangelicals, traditionalists, just right-wing provocateurs in general. But yes, a social justice warrior is anyone who wants to institute a social variety of justice in an authoritarian manner that controls society and culture. And believe you me, and I'm sure you're aware of these kind of people, the right-wingers took first blood in this regard, with things like the Satanic Panic and the Red Scare in the 70s through the 90s. And the funny thing is, most of Hollywood was totally on board with shitting all over evangelicals way back when. It is my estimation that in doing so, they were doing a good thing. The problem is, because they won the argument, they became the new establishment. They became the new aristocracy. And in so doing, they let themselves go a little bit mad with power, and they now cannot see anything wrong with their moral schema. Just like the out of touch preachers from, the era of the Satanic Panic who were saying things like heavy metal and rock and roll are the devil's music, don't listen to them, or playing D&D is analogous to witchcraft, you shouldn't let your children play it, or you shouldn't let your kids watch Star Trek because it postulates the existence of aliens, and the Bible says that God only created one people. There were actual people that said that, and I would agree that those people were fucking nuts. But so are you people. So basically what you're saying when you say you're against anti-SJWs is you're saying you're essentially against people who fight against sociocultural authoritarianism for moral reasons. Just because someone claims to be doing the right thing or genuinely believes they're doing the right thing does not mean they're doing the right thing. You have to pay attention to their reasoning, their arguments, their justifications for the positions that they hold, and also the extremity of those positions. Generally speaking, if someone's solution to a bad variety of art is we should burn all this variety of art because it's immoral, that person is a whack job, whether they be left wing or right wing. If Anita Sarkeesian says to me, we should destroy all these video games because they're problematic from a social justice perspective, I'm going to say the same thing to her as I would say to Jack Thompson saying we need to destroy all these video games because they cause violence. You don't get to stymie art for moral reasons, and your attempts to control them are authoritarian nonsense. Please fuck right off. And you calling anti-SJWs, the people against moral puritanism in artistic endeavor, essentially, sad little corners in fandom, means that you are essentially a poster boy for the aristocracy. You are the established order. You're not fighting the good fight against some shadowy cabal of anti-SJW warlords somewhere. You are the warlord, essentially looking down at the peasants trying to organize a peaceful revolution and pissing all over them. And not only pissing all over them, but feeling morally justified in doing so, which is the part that absolutely baffles my brain. You think you're in the right because you're looking at people who you disagree with and saying they're by definition bad people, so nothing they have to contribute is in any way good, and also they don't agree with my moral positions, therefore they must by default be bad people. Do you not see how bat-shittily insane and horrifying that position is? It's like if Hitler walked up to a group of Jews during Nazi Germany and said, "These Jews that are against the Holocaust are bad people." That just goes to prove why we need to Holocaust them. That would be fucking terrifying, especially for anyone that had any sympathy for the Jews. And you saying they don't agree with my definition of equality, therefore they're automatically bad people, is equally fucking horrifying. Especially because you wield power over something you didn't create and are now basically fucking with it just to piss off a large number of the people that actually originally liked that thing. And incidentally, just because you brought up what Star Trek has always been, I feel like we need to play a clip. There is a clip of there's a video on YouTube, someone entitled Picard owns SJW or something along those lines, and it's an episode. It's taken from an episode of Star Trek that's supposed to be a parody of the McCarthy hearings, where people were essentially not allowed during the Red Scare to identify as communists because America was at war with Russia, and the reason they gave for being at war with Russia was they were afraid Russia was going to spread communism to America. But it totally works in a modern context if you think of her as an SJW, because essentially it's the same argument. It's you are in some way problematic, you will corrupt civilization, you will be regressive and violent, therefore I don't have to listen to you.
Give me one moment. Okay, Don, I'm sorry, I cannot play the clip on the fact that my computer is being super fucking wonky, and it's like,
Okay.
I mean, I could, maybe okay, I'll exit out of the share screen right now, and then swap the article for YouTube for a moment. That'll help. think having 3 tabs open is the problem.
Mm.
And yeah, I got nothing to say. Again, this is like Dawn's show right now.
You really need to get caught up with Star Trek.
Again, man, it never really appealed to me.
Try starting with TNG, because I had the same problem before I started watching the Next
It was
Generation.
TNG I started with.
What episodes? Do you remember anything about the episodes you watched? Because you might have just gotten a bad episode or two.
Not remember. Okay, Star Trek Next Generation. Card. What was it?
Owns SJW or something along those lines. Was what the title was. Hopefully it's still there and YouTube hasn't bitched it out. But who knows?
Well, there's one that says Star Trek Next Generation predicts SJW Utopia. Next Generation Season 5 episode The Outcast.
I don't think that's it.
Well, the first one that comes up is TNG. Picard owns the Shillak in Signs of Command.
I think that no, that's not it. God damn it.
Captain Picard discusses SJWs. Drumhead.
That might be it, yeah.
Okay, well, give me 1 moment. I need to check in my. Oh, I think this is the closest one. Okay, give me a second. Okay. Oh, shit. Okay. Okay, hold on. Forgot to press share audio.
Yeah.
It's like it's super small button and you barely notice it.
Mm-hmm.
So you constantly forget to press it.
Hmm.
I honestly gotta check to see if the settings, if it just shares automatically. Okay, so I had to skip 20 seconds because mostly it's just atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is the clip you were talking about, Dalton. So, Banana?
Banana.
Admiral Henry has called an end to any more hearings on this matter. That's good. Admiral Satine has left the Enterprise.
Everything we've come so far. Torture of heretics, burning witches, all ancient history. Then, before you can blink an eye, something threatens to start all over again.
I believed her.
Banana.
Oh, right. I think okay.
I loved her. I did not see what she was.
Mr. Worf, villains who twirl their moustaches are easy to spot. Those who clothe themselves in good deeds are well camouflaged.
I think after yesterday, people will not be so ready to trust her.
Maybe. But she, or someone like her, will always be with us, waiting for the right climate in which to flourish.
Banana or
Banana. Yeah, I think.
Bring fear in the name of righteousness.
Yeah.
Vigilance.
There was more to that clip where Picard talks about the first the minute the first man is the first person is censored, the first freedom denied, the first liberty taken, is the moment when we're all in chains or something along those lines. And the reason I bring this up is, well, you saw it there. People do very, very bad things, or can potentially do very, very bad things in the name of doing what they think is right. The only solution, so far as I can see, is just to not let your moral indignation run away with you, not to be a warrior for social justice. In the same way as back in the day, the measure that people or the measure that the authoritarians of yesteryear used was family values. And who could ever conceivably have a problem with family values, right? It sounds so nice and so beautiful and so euphemistically perfect. Same thing with social justice. Who could have a problem with social justice? It sounds so good and so pure and so decent and crap. But as we know, family values doesn't simply mean a desire to have a family. It also means things like homophobia or the forced implementation of Christianity or the shunning of unorthodox forms of lifestyle and so on and so on. And just like social justice, it doesn't just mean social justice. It means things like patriarchy theory. It means, or at least not in the modern context, it means patriarchy theory. It means the wage gap. It means rape culture. It means stifling art for the sake of political messaging. It means using art as a means to an end rather than an end in itself. It means judging art entirely based on its socio-political and cultural context rather than its actual merits.
Dalton.
And that, yeah.
I'm just gonna like kind of wrap it up so we can like move on, obviously, because I feel like you're kind of blowing your load early.
Yeah, probably. Moving
So, I
on.
mean, if you have any final thoughts, I'd say just
Yeah, I'll save them for later. I'm sure this isn't going to be the last time I'm going to have to make that point. But
right.
yeah, it annoys me that someone can unironically hate on anti-SJWs because it basically means you're against the people who are questioning the moral Puritans. You're against the people who are saying, hold on, I don't think we should burn witches, and I don't think we should prevent people in 50s Hollywood from being communist just because they want to be. And so on and so on. That's basically what you're saying. You're saying we should give people absolute and unquestioned control over society and culture, and we shouldn't have any issues with them being overly moralistic fucks. But we are where we are. Freedom is slavery, and war is peace, and truth is lies, and what the fuck do we know?
We are a very complicated and very stupid species.
Uh-huh. and we keep making the same goddamn mistakes over and over. You just change the color scheme, and everyone forgets that you have to apply principles consistently.
Yeah.
Because the last time this went badly, it was the
Dalton.
red team. So if we give it to the blue team, it won't change. It'll change things somehow.
Dalton.
Yeah, I know. Moving on.
Chabon then specifically pointed out the deaths of Ikeb and Hugh. In the course of this season, we show the death of Ikeb, who was a recurring character on Voyager, and then the death of Hugh, who's a recurring character on The Next Generation. When we talked about it, we definitely had a sense of like, there's probably going to be some people who are upset that these characters have died.
You don't say, you ignorant fucks.
See, I don't know. Like, I want to bring up like the thing with like writing and killing characters from like, because this is a sequel series, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. And you bring characters from previous series, and you kill them off in the sequel series. That's fine. It's been done good before.
Yeah. The
Again,
problem isn't the problem isn't the dying that people have a problem with. It's how they died and in what context they died and how unceremoniously and unimportant it was played off when they died.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I haven't actually sat down and watched the entirety of Star Trek Picard, but I have seen the death scenes in question here, and they weren't treated like important figures. They were basically killed off like cannon fodder because the plot called for it. Essentially, there was no, montage of Picard reminiscing over good times he had with Hugh and the other character from Voyager. Which, to be fair, Voyager is when Star Trek started to go downhill, so Voyager's kind of iffy. But go ahead.
I don't know. Like, this was gonna be like how a good character death was done in like a sequel series. Granted, it's more of a continuation series than a sequel series, but I think it kind of still works in this context.
Mm-hmm.
Naruto Shippuden.
Mm-hmm.
The death of Jiraiya. He well, it works in a few different ways because he is killed by a former student that he kind of failed. But he dies being able to get a message to his allies and his friends in order to stop the bad guy. And he dies at peace knowing that his new student, Naruto, will be able to carry on his legacy of trying to bring peace to the world. And he dies with a smile on his face, knowing that the world's in good hands, even though he's not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, the character himself is he always wanted to die in a gallant, heroic way. Hence, a nickname he had was Jiraiya the Gallant.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, he did die gallantly, but not like in an epic sort of manner,
Mm-hmm.
So it works on a few different ways. Obviously, it provides it's an emotional gut punch.
Mm-hmm.
It sets the stage for the series for after, like the episodes after.
Mm-hmm.
It's motivation and character development for the other characters.
Mm-hmm.
And it also provides a it just proves how badass and terrifying the villain is to kill off kind of a fan favorite and major character.
Mhm.
So that's how you do a character death, specifically in a sequel series of a kind.
Mhm.
I'm mostly just talking out of my ass at this point, so Dalton, please take over.
Yeah, okay. So actually, come to think of it, let's talk about Hugh for a second, because Hugh actually has one of the most awesome arcs in I would say any story, but in particular in Star Trek. So Hugh was a Borg, and for those that don't know what the Borg is, the Borg are a species of aliens that many centuries ago decided to give basically um their entire sense of individuality over to a collective, and they augmented themselves using technology. So each individual Borg has no individual identity whatsoever. They don't even know what individuality is, other than the fact that it was some bad primitive thing that we've done away with now. And Hugh used to be a Borg by the name, or by the designation of Third of Five. And through a series of plot contrivances, Hugh ends up getting captured and severed from his connection to the collective, because they're all linked via technological signals and or telepathy. But the crew of the Enterprise successfully sever him from the collective, and for the first time ever, he actually has to start using his mind. And he learns, while he's in the company of the crew, what individuality is, and starts individuating himself, which is when he takes the name Hugh, because the engineer of the Enterprise, Geordi LaForge, addresses him as you, and he mishears it as Hugh, and he decides to take that as his name. And through the course of Star Trek Next Generation, Hugh has to deal with the highs and lows of individuality, because the crew of the Enterprise decides to use his individuality as a virus to infect the Borg, because they realize that if they allow him to rejoin the collective will feel what he feels, which includes his sense of individuality. And of course, there are many, many ways he's used and abused throughout the course of this, including being tricked by Lore at one point, which is Data's evil brother, but that's not here nor there. And you motherfuckers of Star Trek Picard turned a character whose entire identity is about exploring the nuances of individuality and the value of an individual mind and an individual personality, and you turned him into cannon fodder who basically dies for a one-off villain. Do you not understand why that pissed everyone off? His essential arc was about what it means to be a being and what it means to be human, and you kill him off basically as a disposable character to be thrown away for people to just reference and then banish off to the irrelevancy dimension when you were done with him. Do you see how that was kind of disrespectful? Moving along.
Okay, I thought you might have had something. Okay. He justified Ikip, saying the death of Ikip has now become part of the story of 7 of 9. It felt completely called for, and we couldn't have told our story without it. I mean, the death of Ikip is upsetting, probably because it's fairly gruesome, which I understand, but also because, he's so powerless. He has no agency. He's really a victim. Let's see. What else did he say? He then justified Hugh's death, but that isn't the case with the death of Hugh. He dies trying to do what he's been trying to do for his entire adult life, which is help former Borg. His death felt meaningful.
Can't even with this shit. You kill them off, not trying to help other Borg. You kill them off essentially as the character who says, "Get behind me, I'll hold them off." And it wasn't even a substantive villain, it was one-off villains that did it. And incidentally, you missed part of Hugh's key features there. He doesn't just try to help other Borg for the sake of helping other Borg. He tries to help other Borg see the value of their individuality. And you thought it was a good idea to have Hugh, the character whose entire arc is about valuing someone's individual worth, to just haphazardly sacrifice himself to a one-off villain and let a bunch of other people continue to survive. So you essentially made him sacrifice himself for the collective. You stupid cunts. You made a character who was about individuality sacrifice himself for the collective. God fucking damn it. And he's dead now, so it's not like that's ever gonna get fixed at any point, unless this is in an alternate universe, which is sort of my headcanon at this point.
So obviously, if he were to die, his kind of character arc would obviously be sacrificing for an individual.
Yeah, or just not letting himself be put into a deathly situation in the first place because he knows the value of him as an individual. If anything, he should essentially have been like a Borg counselor that helps, Borgs that have just broken free of the collective figure out what it means to be an individual. He should essentially be the Borg equivalent of a philosopher. If we're genuinely wanting to see his arc conclude to a certain extent. And I don't mind him necessarily sacrificing himself for a group of other people or what have you, because that, part of being an individual is knowing what to sacrifice yourself for, what to lay down your life for, what to live for, etc. But to die off screen essentially in a one-off aspect, to just kind of be mowed down as though you're not relevant, given that his entire arc was about discovering personal relevance, that's just it shits on the character, man, and I rage because the episode where Hugh first showed up, an episode called I Borg, is one of the better episodes of TNG and one of the most influential episodes of TNG. And the reason it's called I Borg is because the Borg have no concept of I. So one of the first signs that Hugh is developing a sense of individuality is when he says, "I will not do X, Y, or Z." He uses I instead of we, and that becomes the first sign of he's developing a sense of self.
Why can't we have good things?
Because people think that calling anything good is just a subjective statement that has no bearing on anything thing that pertains to the thing in question.
I feel like I need to like fast track a lot of my ideas into something, into some type of media.
Don't rush. Don't rush any more than you absolutely feel you have to, because it's not gonna do any good for anybody if you rush it too fast and it ends up not being very good. Now, I don't think that there's much danger of that because I know you. Also, we do. We basically have conversations about your ideas every week. So obviously you have some kind of control group, but yeah, don't waste your talent just because you feel like the world will die without you.
Alright, where was I? Shaban then detailed he did not understand that some fans would be upset about certain characters being killed. I will say I don't think I quite understood that there were going to be people who would be upset about a character's death regardless of how that character died. Hold on, don't let me finish the whole quote.
Okay.
That's simply the fact of a character dying. That was not okay with them. Even if I had known that, I would have ultimately dismissed it because it seems I just don't understand television in that way. No, you don't understand storytelling or writing in that way, you dumbass.
Yeah. Okay. It's not that they died, it is very much how they died. And second of all, one of the things that might be going on for the few people that are genuinely upset that you killed them and not how you killed them might be because Star Trek is a long-running series that has had many creative voices throughout time. You have to be very, very careful when you're killing a character in a long-running universe. If you're the motherfucker that kills Superman, for example, you better make sure that it's the best possible death scene that you can give that character. Because that character has had 70 plus fucking years of continuity at this point. Likewise, in Star Trek, most people would rather a situation in which those characters survived for as long as they could conceivably survive. It's one of the great things about having a fictional medium because fictional mediums don't need to age in real time. So, if your idea was to kill off someone like you needed to put your best foot forward. And as I've been going on about, you very much didn't do that. So yeah, there are going to be people that are upset that you personally killed them off. Because even if they have to die at some point, which is fair, although the Borg are functionally immortal thanks to their technology, but that's neither here nor there. If a character has to die, I think most people would rather they die in a context that honors that character, that makes their death one of the most important and moving aspects of an episode or even a season, generally speaking. Like, this past week, The Magicians ended. And did it end in a way that, ruined all the characters? Hell no. It ended basically with, finally, after 5 seasons worth of we thought we saved the world and then something terrible happened. It ended with them finally being able to enjoy the fruits of all of their labors, given they've saved the world like 5 separate times now. That was the appropriate way to end this because people have been waiting for that for the entire run of the series. Now imagine how much more investment, how much more energy there is inherent in a show that started in 1967 and has run pretty much consistently throughout the entire decades in between then and now. Because that's what you're dealing with Star Trek. Not to mention the incredibly consistent world building of Gene Roddenberry that you've now pissed on. But that's neither here nor there. Also, good Star Trek was possible after the death of Gene Roddenberry. So don't give me this. It's not our fault Gene Roddenberry is dead. Shit, because most of the best parts of Next Generation were after Gene's death, unfortunately. And also, Deep Space Nine and Voyager, although Voyager got iffy. So, yeah, you can fuck yourself. The problem is you didn't put enough effort into the death scene, and therefore you basically made Hugh into nameless background character number 1472. And that is a shit ending for someone that actually made it into the Star Trek movies at one point. Started on Next Gen and made it all the way into the movies, and you crapped all over his death. Fuck off.
Right. Okay. Right. Jabon appears to be missing the point about how fans are reacting to characters' deaths. It's not the characters died; it's that these characters had already gone through deep character arcs in previous series. Jabon and Picard seem to have only included them in their story to kill them off. It looks and feels cheap.
Yeah, agreed. Moving on. We can actually skip over his summation if there's nothing else related to the actual story in here.
Not only does it feel they include these characters just to kill them off, but the show uses gore in an attempt to add shock value to the deaths. That's a huge negative. The way Picard treats death, it turns the show and Star Trek into a bargain bin version of Game of Thrones. It's like Siobhan saw Ned Stark's death in season 1 and wanted to clone that the emotional feeling viewers got from it. However, he's failed spectacularly.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. I don't know. It just feels like this is kind of going away like the same.
Yeah, like I said, we can skip over his opinions if there's nothing actually pertaining to the story left.
The reaction to the character's death wasn't the only fan reaction Chabon spoke about. He also went into detail on how he views those fan reactions. Many peruses Twitter and Reddit. Peruses. Chabon begins by saying that he probably should ignore fan reactions to the show like a number of his Picard partners. I mean, one possible reason that I could have had, and I think some of my partners on Picard do have, is to ignore it all completely, or just take a little glance, maybe look at Rotten Tomatoes, see what kind of consensus of the reviews from the critics have been, which has been pretty darn favorable, and just sort of leave it at that. Okay, again, Rotten Tomatoes, total bullshit, I believe, and the critics are, the actual critics are just kind of, what's the word?
There,
Don?
describe what word you're thinking of, and maybe I can try and figure it out.
Yeah, the word. Well, the way I would describe it, pandering. That's the word I was thinking of.
Yeah, they're basically the self-appointed intelligentsia. But in that entire thing, it's very telling that you went not to the people who have a long-standing history with Star Trek, not to the people actually consuming your product. You went to the self-appointed aristocracy of entertainment. You went to the critics. you didn't even consider the possibility that those critics might have a class bias that might lean them towards liking it while the audience does not. How the fuck do you think it's more intellectually honest to seek out people you know are going to be the self-appointed intelligentsia who get it versus the people you're actually supposed to be trying to get to consume your product? It's like being a chef and saying, well, I know I get no people visiting my restaurant, but I had Gene Shalit in here and he liked it. So the rest of those people must just be undereducated. Dumbass. Moving on.
Yeah. I feel like we should like read like a little bit more of this and then kind of move on because
Yeah, we've got some time limit issues here.
yeah. And plus, I think
Fucking hell.
yeah. If anything, we'll probably try and finish this next week.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let me just like read one more bit of this and we'll move on. Right. It then reveals he peruses Reddit and Twitter. I've gone on maybe a half a dozen times since the season started to look uh, on Reddit. I will say the quality of comment and of criticism on Reddit is so much vastly higher than it is on Twitter. Even some quite strongly negative criticism. It tends to be much better reasoned, much better supportive with evidence in a way that I can respect and engage with and listen to.
Okay, I will give him points for this. I will entirely give him points for this. And sir, you might want to consider the fact that there's an actual character limit to Twitter, and people tend to tweet in a more casual and cavalier sense, whereas Reddit is sort of meant to mimic old school internet forums, and old school internet forums tended to be populated by a lot more tech savvy and intellectual varieties of people, so that might be why. Twitter is mostly populated by hipsters and or content creators trying to network, so that makes sense.
Okay, folks, on a sake of time limits, we are going to end this article, but we will cover it next week. And the next article we're going to cover, which would be the third article of this list, will have to be our last one because again, every month we have 20 hours for the whole month. And
this week is taking longer than I expected.
Yeah. So the next one we're going to finish and then kind of call it a night. Unfortunately, and then we'll cover the rest next week and only maybe two more like new ones or something. We'll work it out, but again, we're just on a time limit here, and I'm sorry about that.
We really so there's that.
Honestly, I feel like we gotta make sure I honestly gotta read through these articles, like proofread them.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Okay. 1 second. It's loading. This is a good one. Well, I say good in relative terms. It's the IO9 one.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Oh wait, is that a long one? It's not that long actually, but again, knowing us.
Yeah. But yeah, it'll contains enough stupid to justify it being the last story for the evening. So there's that.
Right. Okay. So this is from io9.giz
Gizmodo.
Gizmodo.com. This is Our Fascination with Canon is Killing the Way We Value Stories by James Whitbrook. This was published Wednesday, which was March 31st,
Mm-hmm.
I believe. And yeah, that's where it is. That's what it's called. As pop culture we love becomes increasingly dominated by vast franchises of interconnected worlds and stories, kind of always been like that, but
Yeah, I mean, some of the earliest recorded writings, period, were literal epic poems that usually involved, multiple mythical locations, several gods, and an assortment of heroes, and that's like the oldest story we have written is literally written on stone tablets. It's the Epic of Gilgamesh, and it basically um, talks about like the globe-trotting adventures of a Sumerian king who wants to become immortal. So this is not new by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. All right. So does it become dominated by one singular question from diehard fans? Is the thing we're about to consume canon to everything else we've consumed before? Is that really a question that people ask? I mean, like, I can get it, I can understand it. I'm just, uh,
People want to know that the events they're currently reading about will have an impact on the rest of the events that they care about in this context. Yes.
yeah, no, I get that. I'm just saying, like, mostly when I read or watch or consume something, I owe it. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is it good? Just want
Yeah. Usually he is strawmanning here. But yeah, to the point he's trying to make very clumsily, people want people want any variety of information they consume to abide by logical parameters. And if there's a surplus of complex information, then they want to simplify it as much as they can into logical increments. It's where the canoning impulse comes from. People want their stories to be intelligible because a story that isn't intelligible can't be effectively communicated.
right, right. It's an attitude that's turning our love of stories into some bizarre archival competition.
You mean people care about the logical standards of the things they're consuming and don't just allow themselves to be completely subservient to fleeting, irrelevant, irrational emotions and subjectivity. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's called being a stable human being and being a rational actor. Not even children are usually prone to letting their emotions run away with them quite to the degree it seems you want to, or you want them to. Because he's basically saying, shouldn't shouldn't we just be allowed to let our feelings tell us what's canon? Why do we even need to focus on canon? It's so weird that people actually want to invest mental energy into organizing this stuff. Yet no, it's a function of why we care. When you care about a person, you want to make sure they have clothes on their back and food in their belly. When you care about a story, you want to make sure it's coherent. This is basic bitch shit at this point.
There's the cat.
Yes, cat, what?
Alright, canon is not inherently a bad thing, of course. It can provide structure to chaos, and it can provide a sense of not just continuity, but stakes as that continuity progresses. The idea that lets
And
characters,
depth and craftsmanship and artistry. You're
Mhm,
forgetting those.
yeah, the idea lets characters bear the impact of events on their journeys across not just one narrative, but many, allowing them to grow and change to the point that they might even be entirely different kinds of people compared to where we first met them.
It's also inherently better because it allows for more structure and rigidity in general. In the same way, it's more impressive for someone to sculpt, you know, a many-sided diamond out of crystal than it is for someone to simply just take a rock and polish it. Generally speaking, the human mind craves artful complexity and almost mathematical precision on this kind of shit. So yeah, a more complex story that is more rationally straightforward will beat a simple story basically any time when you allow it to be considered rationally. Simple stories might be more appealing on an emotional level, but usually if you're that um persuaded by simple stories, it usually means that you yourself are simple and or immature. There's a reason why the stories we tell to very, very young toddlers are much more simple than, say, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, and why we hope to eventually allow our children to go from the simple stories we tell them to edify them emotionally to things like the Iliad and the Odyssey. Moving on.
Mhm. There's still plenty of room for variety and interpretation in even a relatively strictly defined canon, just like at Star Wars, and the kinds of stories you can still tell despite the mandate from up upon high that anything told must fit into what's been established since Disney took over the franchise. And
Yeah, but the stupid aspect of that was not them insisting that they maintain a canon. The stupid aspect of that was throwing out the pre-existing canon. So if anything, this is a counterexample to exactly the point you're trying to make. Disney decided to authoritate using subjectivity that the canon that previously existed didn't exist anymore, rather than shaping their own story to the pre-existing canon, which is why it's stupid. You can't decanonize something using authority alone. You have to do it using logic, reasoning, and hopefully a certain level of argumentation, even if it's just an internal one. But you're making the exact opposite point, and somehow you think a counterexample to your point is in favor of your point. Moving on.
mhm. All right. But those stories benefit from the added weight of being definitive interpretations and events that flesh out an entire galaxy's worth of stories. But where canon, or rather our hunger for it, goes terribly wrong is when whether something matters or not becomes the base standard for how we consider a piece of media. Again, I don't think that's entirely true. I
Yeah, right here you're actually making a contradiction in terms. Why why should the fact that something matters matter? Because generally speaking, in order for something to matter, it has to matter. You're like this is the most circular, self-defeating bollocks I've ever heard. Yes, people like when the things that they put time, effort, energy, and attention into actually fucking matter. Value exists, and it will always exist, and it will exist irrespective of people's desire to organize information into canons. Because usually, and this is the aspect I wish he would focus on more, canons tend to be self-organizing, whether it's from the author of the original work or whether it's just sort of the IP itself pre-existing and therefore sort of validating itself. Canons usually are self-organizing. The only time when canons become not self-organizing is when someone tries to intervene to fuck up pre-existing canon. When someone tries to use subjective authority to impact canon because they would prefer a more interpretive art form rather than a concrete, rational art form. Again, here we have, if anything, a counterexample to exactly what he's trying to say, and he thinks it's for his own argument. Things have to matter in order to matter, goddammit. This should be Logic 101 type shit. Moving on.
Where was I? Okay, hold on.
Whether or not something matters becomes our only mechanism to
Right.
validate
Okay, so moving on from that. It's an attitude that has become predominant not just within fandom circles itself, but in the media commentary that has developed around these fandoms and the blockbuster franchises that dominate our popular culture. Critics and fans alike are now less interested in actually interpreting a piece of media thematically or to engage with why they liked or disliked it, but instead to pick it apart and break it down to the basic components of what are essentially its pure, unflinching facts. I kind of agree with him, but I feel like it's kind of
yeah, he's saying a semi-intelligent thing for the sake of defending a very stupid point.
Yeah. Like, I do think people don't really enjoy things nowadays. Granted,
Well,
there's a lot to enjoy, but still.
yeah, but okay. Here's the flaw in his thinking. He thinks the value of art is in interpreting that art, not in the art itself, not self-contained within the art itself. There's nothing in regards to the merits of the art that cause a reaction. For him, it's all about the subjectivity. And that fundamentally is wrong. Interpretation should not be necessary in good art. In good art, it should essentially speak for itself. You shouldn't have to put your subjectivity into it. In fact, I think the more subjectivity you allow for in art, the worse said art is, frankly. Because you're basically forcing the audience to do the work that you as the creator should have done, or that you should have as the creator explored yourself. It's like if you're playing a game of riddles and someone proposes a solution to the riddle, and instead of actually giving them anything regarding resembling a concrete answer, you just look at them and go, I don't know, why do you expect me to know the answer to this riddle that I proposed? Fail. But yeah, people should focus more on why they like something. But here's the thing, the why someone likes something should not be strictly emotional. It can have emotional elements because we're talking about the realm of the emotions, but you should be able to describe the emotions you're having and also the rational context of why. But that's the thing. the interpretation someone gives to something is internal to the person doing the interpreting, not the art itself. The merits of why someone likes something should be integral to the art itself, not the interpreter. You're conflating interpretation with the opposite of interpretation, which is internal merits. And that's the problem. I don't know how you got that jumbled. Well, I do, roughly speaking, know how you got that jumbled, but it doesn't work, dude. Interpretation is the opposite of concrete merits. You can't just conflate them back and forth like they're the same thing. And therefore, and this is why it's relevant to your proposition, the hard and fast facts allow people to explain why they like something, because the reasoning behind your like for something should be logically coherent and concrete. It shouldn't just be a wasteland of abstract subjective interpretation. If your only reasons for liking something are abstract interpretation, then you actually don't know why you like that thing. You don't have a rationale as to why you like it. You just glide off of your own emotions. And emotions are notoriously fickle. That's why we have the canon impulse in the first place, because we want to make sense of the things we like, because value is an important aspect of reality. And if you're going to make a claim regarding an important aspect of reality, like value, then you need to approach it on logical terms, not emotional ones. Or at the very least, it's better if you approach it with a combination of logic and emotion instead of just emotion. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. One sec. Okay. Right. Okay. Sorry. Google Star Wars or the Marvel movies, and you will likely see it as many articles and videos with headlines like X confirms Y is canon, X questions answered by new media, or X things we learned about character Z in this new book, movie, TV show. As you will, critical essays about these stories, if not more. And before someone accuses me of throwing stones in glass houses, yes, IO9 totally does this too. Like I said, discussing canon is fun. It can add a lot to a series.
Okay, so you're essentially undermining your own position. Again, people want information regarding the thing they like, because on some level, it's information regarding the thing they like that made them like it in the first place. Imagine saying, I like apples to someone who has never eaten an apple before. Imagine someone who's never eaten an apple saying, I like apples. That makes no goddamn sense. You have to have some point of reference for the thing you're talking about, otherwise, you're essentially making an absolutely empty statement. You're making an uncoherable statement. And therefore, when things change in regards to the things we like to be apprised of them. And generally speaking, learning more about the thing you like is a way in which you express that you like it. The more you like a given topic, the more expert you are going to end up being in that topic, because you're going to have the passion necessary to learn more about that topic. You're essentially criticizing investment here. That's why canons exist, because the longer your investment is maintained, the more rationalized it has to be in order to be stable. Because as we just covered, emotions are fickle, logic and facts, not so much. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. Um, but this craving for it, above all else, is a toxic attitude, not just to the way we talk pieces of media from a critical perspective, but in fan circles as well. The hunger for facts above all else leads to things like filler episode becoming a derogatory term for stories that don't advance the larger ongoing plot of a narrative or don't include some shocking new revelation that someone can add to a list. Okay, for the record, filler episodes mainly suck when they cut in between the larger plot and also just suck. There can be good filler, don't get me wrong, but usually there
Yeah.
isn't.
But here's the thing. Filler is something that exists in all walks of life. Filler is essentially something that is non-substantive, something that is cut in with substance to decrease its overall density. Like I'm gonna use a random ass historical metaphor again because I'm making a bunch of those tonight. In the 1700s in Britain, they actually had a massive problem of bakers cutting their bread, cutting their flour and other ingredients with materials that weren't edible or that didn't help the baking. So the British government passed this thing called the Assize of Bread and Ale, which basically forced regulation standards onto the baking of bread so that it wasn't cut with things that was non-substantive. Because if you buy a loaf of bread and then you find out you only have as much bread as you think you did, you're going to get pissed off because you paid full price for it. Well, the same applies with art. If you signed up for something that was substantive and then you find out that substantive thing is cut with things that are not substantive, you feel gypped. Generally speaking, in a world of energy and matter, we like things that are substantive. I'm sorry if that bothers you, but you missed the memo that you are in an existence. And in existence, substance is king. And apparently, even outside of existence, substance is king, but that's neither here nor there either. Essentially, what we're saying is you are wasting space, time, and or efforts on something that is entirely immaterial, which is wrong no matter which aspect of reality you apply it to. In food, you get gypped. In auto parts, you get gypped. And in storytelling, you get gypped when people try to put non-substantive shit in the place of substance and then don't tell anybody. Moving on.
Yeah, one second. Yeah. All right. It predicts the gatekeeping act of being a fan that is built on how much you know about a thing over whether you actually enjoy the thing or not. It's an attitude that in turn feeds the equally unruly and constantly growing spoiler culture because a fandom that values pure details above all else puts weight in the knowledge of those details. Okay, Dalton, before you do, may I?
You may.
Yeah. Okay, first off, and Dalton was probably, I'm just probably going to be reiterating a point for Dalton. Um, Testing of one's knowledge is pretty much for any type of fandom or geekery. That's just something. Okay, it's just it's not really to prove. It's just more of if you know more, you get to have more discussions and more fun, if anything. And also, if you don't, and others do know more than you, you actually have a chance to learn more and expand your knowledge of the certain thing within that fandom. It's a
Mhm.
normal thing just to test your metal when it comes to being knowledgeable of certain things. That's just what being a geek is about. It's
Yeah,
not gatekeeping.
it's quality control essentially. It it's holding people accountable to their words. If I if I say I'm a priest and it turns out I've not been ordained by any church or studied any religious scriptures, you are well within your rights to say I don't think you're effectively a priest. If I say I'm a general and it turns out I've never been to military school or studied any kind of tactics or served in any wars, then you're well within your rights to say, I don't think you're effectively a general. And if you say, I'm a nerd, when upon any kind of closer inspection, you don't know shit about the things and don't care to, then we're well within your rights of saying, I don't think you're a nerd. In all these cases, I think you're being somewhat opportunistic and trying to co-opt something that you don't understand because you think it will get you respect and authority and clout instead of seeing the value of the thing in itself. And incidentally, sir, you made a massive error when you tried to dichotomize those two things. The reason people want more information about things is because they like it, generally speaking. Nobody spends hours doing something that actively makes them miserable unless they have to, unless they are forced to by, you know, because of course people do jobs that they don't like all the time because they have to. But in terms of voluntary pursuits like entertainment and arts, you don't spend hours looking at, I don't know, Teen Titans Go if you don't like Teen Titans Go, unless you're actually getting enjoyment out of hyper focusing on the negative aspects of it. But even that is a deference to liking something else, i.e., the Teen Titans when it's good is usually what you're defending when you hyper focus on Teen Titans when it's done badly. Point being, it is the love of something that leads people to want to know more about it. And it is also the intricacy of the thing they're learning about that often makes them like it in the first place. So to say those are two different things is to completely misunderstand how human beings like things and why people study things. People don't tend to study things that they don't like unless they have to. But all other things being equal with no other variables, people will be drawn to become experts in things that they find edifying or worthwhile or enjoyable in their own right. And I don't know why I have to explain that to you. Have you been a human being lately? Moving on.
Right. Okay. Let me. mm, having this. I'm spacing on it a little bit. Okay. The need robs discussion about the stories we get of nuance and interpretation, because who cares what you think happened when there's an answer from the Word of God to that question you might have had. And
Okay, so there are two sides to this. If he's talking specifically about the authority of the author, I totally agree with him here. The author doesn't get to say what happened. Logic gets to say what happened, which means that if you have a more rational argument for why something should have happened, then you are, in my opinion, more right. And in fact, some of my favorite authors are authors who are willing to take their egos out of it. Like the guy who wrote the book Who Framed Roger Rabbit is based on saw what the movie did with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and he liked it so much that he actually wrote a sequel book that changed the mechanics of his world to something more akin to what the movie did. And as a counterexample to this, someone like Thomas Harris, who wrote the backstory for Hannibal Lecter, very obviously didn't understand his own character, and as a result, Hannibal Rising is one of the most awful things ever, because he didn't understand his own character as well as his audience did. If he's talking about authorial intention as the end all and be all, then I totally agree with him. It's totally overrated. But he doesn't appear to be talking about that, or at the very least, it's not relevant to the other point he's trying to make, which is trying to rationalize canon is stupid. Yeah, no. You don't get to say, well, I believe this happened just because I believe this happened. Subjectivity has no authority here in this aspect of art. It does have some say in the sense of, I can't tell you you're wrong to like apples because of how your taste buds are arranged, because everyone's taste buds are objectively arranged differently. But if you start making rational judgments based on that taste, then those rational judgments will be judged rationally. You can't just say, but my emotions, and expect everyone to take you seriously. What we're essentially saying is, you can't engage in a rational argument using nothing but subjectivity and emotion as fuel for it. You have to engage with a rational argument on rational and argumentative terms. Moving on.
Okay. And more sinisterly, beyond the way it shapes our discourse, it's a craving that further in the enmeshes our love of a world not to the world itself, but to the masters behind that world. To twist a lit crit turn of phrase, there cannot be the death of the author if the author's got their own fandom wiki.
Okay. On this point, I agree with them. The author shouldn't be the unquestionable authority in regards to a story. However, the way that you challenge an author is not through subjective emotion, it is through argument. You don't like what the author says, or you don't think the author understands their own work well enough, then you have to demonstrate that you understand that world better than the author does. And like I said, in some cases, like in the case of the guy that wrote Roger Rabbit, the author might actually concede the point to you and realize they didn't understand their own work as well as they thought they did. Because authors are essentially like explorers. They explore a world in their own head, but just because they're the first ones to get there doesn't mean they know everything about that world. They still have to actually go through the process of exploring it. And if someone can demonstrate that they understand the world they're exploring better, then that person should, by rights, have rights to say that they do. But you have to do it in rational terms, or you're fucked, essentially. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. It's fine if you want something to matter to a world and characters you care about, but it shouldn't be the be all and end all to your investment in them either.
But it is, because, okay, again, you made the same earth-shatteringly stupid, galaxy-destroyingly stupid mistake twice. For something to matter, it has to matter. Otherwise, it's a contradiction in terms. And investment is essentially sort of like investment to a story is sort of like air to a balloon. When you invest in something, it increases the volume of that thing and makes it more meaningful. Meaning is essentially what we are getting at when we use the word matter in this context. Meaning is the matter of storytelling. So what you're essentially saying is you shouldn't be focused on the meaning of this thing, or you shouldn't have to know the meaning of this thing for it to mean something to you. And no, you very much should, because that's how logic works. For something to be X, it has to be X. And something can't be both X and not X at the same time when X and the opposite of X are opposed to each other. Something can't be unmeaningful and meaningful at the same time. Deal with it.
Moving on.
Moving on.
Almost done. So that's good. Huh?
Huzzah, I said, because we're almost done.
Yeah. Fandom is such a wide, shareable passion, full of different opinions and interpretations about a thing, united by a shared, vested interest and love for storytelling. Valuing the sterile facts of those stories more than the things about them that make us think or feel is a sad thing indeed. That's the end of the article.
The things that make us think about a thing are the facts and the logic and the logistics and the world building of that thing. That is the point at which our brains become engaged instead of just our emotions. Because emotions can actually be done just with the limbic system. To actually engage cognition, you have to have some level of data, whether it just be logically oriented data or whether it be hard and fast. These are the rules of the world. These are the, empirical facts about this story. In order to engage in thought in regards to something, you actually have to have something that exists in the realm of thought attached to it. In order to feel about something, yes, you don't necessarily need to have facts and reasoning behind things, but I defy you to engage your emotions entirely without any input from your brain, considering most of the time that's where emotions live.
Yeah.
Not to mention that the things that cause people to feel are also often the particulars of the storytelling. If your feeling comes entirely regardless of the world you're existing in, then you're not really getting that emotion as a result of the world itself. You're essentially becoming increasingly self-centered and basically using at that point you're basically using the story as a Rorschach test and disregarding everything particular or specific about it. Which at that point I would say you're an egotistical bastard and you need to fuck off. Because there are actually people here who want to love this thing for what it is and not what it can do for you. Fundamentally and essentially here, it seems like you want the entire universe to revolve around you and several other universes while we're at it. And I'm sorry, but no, you don't just get to use everything in existence as your personal playground. Some things exist independently of you. Deal with it.
I'd ask if you're good, but I don't think you are. I'd ask if you're good, but I'm assuming you're just annoyed right now.
Yeah, it's this whole why do we have to be so invested in things like merit and reason and logic? Why can't we just use our feelings and our subjectivity? Fucking argument again. I
Yeah.
hate it.
So we'll do a quick comic recommendations. Obviously, since I've been reading it, I will recommend Doom Patrol. It's really good. It's by Grant Morrison.
Mhm.
It's good in the way that it's got this it's weird but grounded. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
that kind of sums up Grant Morrison in a nutshell.
Yeah. So that's pretty much all I can recommend this week because that's pretty much all I've read. Oh,
Um,
Sandman as well. Sandman. I will recommend Sandman because I like that series and it needs to be recommended more to people.
you need to get back into that at some point.
I know it's literally staring me in the face right now. So
Let's see. If anyone hasn't gotten a chance to read the Dresden Files, before Peace Talks comes out, because it comes out in, I want to say July. I would recommend it. I know I've recommended Dresden Files a lot on this show, but read Dresden Files. It's awesome. And there are also Dresden Files comics that sort of flesh out the world actually written by the main author. So there's that too. So I guess on that note, outro.
great. One moment as I. Okay. With that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, aviase, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Shalom. Now fuck off, all of you. Goodbye.
bye.